Hey folks, a quick note about this episode with Kristian and Joe. Kristian's internet cut out about halfway through, but I think we had a good interview, so we didn't want to scrap this. And you'll see why that's significant as you listen to this episode. In a world where people throw away a lot of things, we should be fixers, and that's really kind of the theme of this episode. And so for Kristian, if you want to follow her on the Rebelle Rally, she is team 124, called Team Wunder On, and it is Rene Vento as the co-driver and Kristian Rene, and they are driving a G-Wagon that is powered by biodiesel of spent chocolate scrap, which is pretty cool, and we're going to discuss that on this episode. So you can also follow them on Instagram at, let's see here, it is Wunder Collective, at Wunder Collective on Instagram, and her website is wunderinstitute.com. So it's Wunder WUNDER Institute, all one word, .com. Not WO, it's WN, like Wonder, and it's pretty cool. So I hope you enjoy this episode, and we had a lot of fun making it, and hopefully maybe we can connect with them after the event is over. Oh, and by the way, of course, the Team Rebelle Rally is it goes off on October 8th through the 17th of 2020. So it's this episode should come out like the week before, and you can follow all that stuff on social media. There's some cool stuff going on. Like, I know Mitsubishi is sponsoring a team that's running a PHEV. So it's a plug-in hybrid electric vehicle in the crossover category. So there's a lot of cool stuff going on. All right, I'll let you get back to the episode. Welcome to episode 199 of Auto Off Topic, and welcome back, Brad. And we have guests tonight, Kristian Rene and Joe Goacher. Kristian is a competitor in the Rebelle Rally, which is an 8-day off-road navigational rally for women. We've talked about the Rebelle Rally before in the Team Free Range Dames episode. The teams are given limited support and rely on manual navigation, meaning no GPS, to plot their course and find the checkpoints. It's a really cool event. Joe is the engineer / evil genius who helped Kristian build her G-Wagon for the competition. And it's got some super cool mods, and we're going to learn about that on this episode.
Some stuff we wouldn't even expect to ever talk about on this episode is going to be talked about in this episode. So,
yeah,
pretty stoked on that.
So
we'll start right away?
Yeah, hello, Kristian, and hello, Joe. It's nice to meet you informally via remote podcasting.
Yes, hello.
Stoked to be here. Thank you.
So I guess we'll get right into it. For Kristian, I want to know what drew you to the Rebelle Rally, and have you run it before? And did you have any prior off-road or motorsport experience before that?
Cool. I've always loved cars and vehicles. I think I probably first fell in love with cars when I saw If Looks Could Kill, and he's a high school guy who gets mistook for a CIA agent and gets gifted a Lotus Esprit, and I just became obsessed with cars because like that's a pretty rad way to live. I've always been into automotive. Definitely came from a racing and automotive family. And I have done the Rebelle. This will be my second year. And they actually introduced themselves to me because I happen to work in chocolate. And it turns out that Rebelles love to eat chocolate. And they came to us as a seeking partnership, in which case it happens to be my dream adventure. So not only do they get chocolate, but I certainly registered and decided I was going to compete.
If Looks Could Kill is a pretty deep cut to start the podcast with. That's not a very famous, popular movie. That was a Richard Grieco film movie, wasn't it?
Nobody knows what happened to that dude, but yeah. It was.
Wow, that's I don't think I've heard of that movie in 15, 20 years at least.
You're going to go back and watch it, aren't you?
I
ain't got anything else to do.
I don't remember The Lotus Esprit being in any movies other than James Bond and Pretty Women, so I'm going to have to I'll have to watch that one again.
Well, I now own that Lotus Esprit, so that's how impactful it was.
That's really cool. What year Lotus Esprit is it, to go way off topic?
It's a 94. I think the last year that they made the original Lotus Esprit Twin Turbo. It's been refurbished a bit. It is probably the most fun car I've ever driven.
That's really cool. I don't know anybody who's ever owned Lotus Esprit. I know a lot of people that have it as their, like, this is kind of a dream car, but also I'm afraid of it car, and they haven't actually bought it. So we've talked about them in the past because they're kind of scary if you don't know them because of the reputation that precedes them. But having talked to a couple people who, outside of my closed circle of friends who have owned them, they've been pretty happy with the cars. So I wonder sometimes if it's really as bad as it's made out to be on the internet.
I think that any supercar is probably as bad as it's made out to be on the internet.
Okay.
You only live once. Live on the edge.
But no, it's amazing. And even, God, it's 30 years old, and it's a head turner. And it's fun. It really is. Love those pop-up lights. And yes, as Pretty Woman explained, it's like riding on rails. Yeah,
they're kind of a timeless design, and the evolution of it really never made it look bad. Like the Pantera was designed about the same time the Lotus Esprit was, and by the end of the Pantera's run, it had so many stick-on doodads, and the Lamborghini Countach is the same way. That the Lotus always just kind of, it seemed to evolve a little better than those did. It never looked like it was the original design with stick-on parts. But I dig those cars a lot. That's really cool to see that you have one. They're always in the back of my mind as maybe someday we could pick one up and play with it.
One day or day one?
Well, day one's passed, so it'll be one day.
All right.
So, Joe, what's your background with cars? How did you get into mechanics, modifying vehicles, building race trucks, dare I say?
Well, always been a passion of mine. I think I kind of alluded to this before. At heart, we're all just a bunch of poor boys stuck fixing our stuff. So, growing up on dirt bikes and racing motocross, kind of got the go fast bug, and got to fix it yourself, otherwise you don't race that weekend. And naturally, when you get to be about driving age, you need to get four wheels. So, kind of morphed into that, and I was hooked. So, really got into off-roading at an early age, and really have a passion for big trucks, diesel stuff, things that go off-road, things that go places where they shouldn't, and more importantly, things that go together that possibly shouldn't have gotten together in the first place, just to make something really kind of cool, unique, and different. So that's kind of my background. I've been in the industry since, my early 20s, and I started this company, Alliance Auto Care, about 11 years ago, from just out of my pocket, and morphed into what it is today, and kind of got into some cool stuff, and just kept growing from there. So
what part of the country did you grow up in that off-roading was something you did young?
Two parts. So I grew up in Kentucky, hence the old poor boy from the backwoods, and the other half of my young adulthood was in Colorado, which really fostered that. I mean, we live at the base of all the awesome trail networks, so we can just get out and go off-roading whenever we want. So two different genres of off-road, if you will. One's definitely backwoods and sticks and mud, and the other one's definitely rocks and more open plains. But take your pick.
That's awesome. Andrew and I talk a lot about off-roading and how we got into it a lot later in life, because it wasn't something that was really, growing up 20 miles north of Boston, Massachusetts. We don't exactly have, trails at our back door, and trails that do exist are generally on private land, and it's not something that's as easily accessible in the Northeast as it is in other places of the country. So it's always interesting to hear where people come from that get into off-road stuff, because
it's
so
it's
far
very
into us
interesting.
for so long.
it's one of those things that, we've determined, almost everyone I've spoken with, it's definitely something that has not been passed down from your parents. That's the common denominator. If anything that discourages, it's always someone else or there's some scenario that gets you hooked, and it's kind of interesting how that transpires.
Yeah, well, there was definitely no way to be developed into off-roading by my parents. My father is a car guy. Andrew's father is a car guy, but neither of them were off-road guys. So it's definitely an interesting thing. And we're just kind of scratching the surface of it, really. We've only started doing off-road stuff ourselves the past couple of years. I mean,
cool.
My moving to Arizona might be a certain push in that direction, because now I do have access to trails and public land and places to go off-road and do things. So it's definitely a new world of cars for both of us. We both grew up doing sports car things, and
absolutely. Not only that, it's just a huge change in skill set. I mean, you take what you know on the street, and you kind of have to reverse it a lot of ways for what's going on off road. So, kudos to anyone that goes out and tries it, and more importantly, anyone that tackles it and just owns it.
Well, I think a lot of the big thing is the older you get, the more you kind of want to slow down a little bit, and going from sports car to off road is slowing down. Well, Andrew's got 3 years older than you, Andrew. So I'll be 40. I'll be 40 this year, and Andrew's 3 years younger than me. So
blah-bitty blah blah blah. The older you get.
Called out.
What nonsense! Such excuses. No,
we still have sports cars, and I still have motorcycles. So we're still,
God bless, do more.
We can't.
The older you get, the bigger mistakes you can make.
That's true. The less costly they are, right?
Yeah, so it would be easy to buy a new 4x4, like a 4Runner, and outfit it with like a few things and have a super capable rig. I want to know, why did you pick a 30-year-old Mercedes G-Wagon as your base vehicle to start with?
I love the G, and I come from a family of fixers. We don't throw out, we don't buy new, we repair, and I mean, it sounds goofy, but really try to honor the craftsmanship. And I have a G as my daily, and it's super capable. And I noticed the same thing with, Range Rover as with G-Wagon. They have these status symbols attached to them, and people think you're drinking champagne in the back seats, and yet they're incredibly capable just as, quote, a base model. They're designed to be the best. And to actually put that into action is truly impressive, no matter what you put it up against. I really love the G-Wagon. And I knew I needed a diesel for a particular project that I was embarking on. And G-Wagon has it, or Mercedes-Benz has it. It just never came to the U.S. So I spent about 6 months looking for an imported diesel G, and it happened to be 30 years old. But that's cool because I have the team and I have the interest in reconditioning it.
So what year exactly is the truck?
She's a 92.
Okay, and is it a 4-door or a 2-door?
It's a 4-door.
Okay.
She arrived as a manual transmission, which I was pretty stoked on. And after modification, it comes with 92. They had a 350 GD with a 603 engine, which had an output of about 135 horsepower. That's pathetic. Especially living in Colorado, we're a mile above sea level, and a lot of our culture takes us into the mountains up to 12,000 feet. And I'm sorry, but 135 horsepower is not going to get you anywhere.
That becomes 70 up high.
Oh, my Lord. You're driving the freeway in second gear. I don't think so. So we switched out engines, and worked to make her a little bit more powerful.
Which engine did you switch it to?
Minor evolution up to a 606. One of the goals is to run her on biofuel, and the 606 has a pre-combustion chamber, so you know that you're getting, you're really maximizing your fuel, and certainly your power output with that pre-combustion. And it's going to eat through just about anything, and you can tune it and throw on a turbo, as Joe has done for the second time, maybe the third time in the past year, this past week. And it's been a fun experiment. Probably more fun for him than it has been for me. I just get to see the aftermath. But we hope to deliver some actual performance, not just reliability.
So is it still a manual?
Oh, so thank you. Yeah, upping the power from 135. I think our first incarnation, and it's not a joke, we've been through at least 3 incarnations on this vehicle, had a power output of maybe 450, and we had a custom clutch made. And this was right before rally, like we were rushing, and I'm sitting at home watching YouTube videos on how to drive, a fifth wheeler, like a semi truck, because the custom clutch was just so complex. I mean, it was a race clutch, and you're supposed to go to rally and go rock climbing with this with this clutch. Basically, we never even made it to the starting line. So when you're in rally and one of your primary goals is to manually navigate, that means with a map and compass, where you're trying to get to 20 hidden checkpoints in a day, using just your wit and and a needle in a pool of water. We decided to go with an automatic. Take one thing off the plate of things to manage.
It's one less failure point too, with the clutch there being a slipping issue with that kind of power, especially.
Yeah, fair enough. But so here's the interesting thing. So you've modified the engine. You're making more power, but we were told that you were running biofuel. So we're kind of curious what led to the decision to run biofuel, and then there's something special about your biofuel. So I guess we can get into that.
So I mentioned the Rebelle reaching out to us. We're a chocolate company. My family owns a chocolate company, and they really like chocolate. But it turns out that despite being really zero waste and having a team of mechanics, because we really are a fixing culture, we don't wait around for the tech to come and manage a machine. We get to work and repair immediately what needs to be taken care of. But we throw away a heck of a lot of chocolate scrap each year. Just for instance, we clean our equipment with cocoa butter. As an emulsifier, it gets pumped through machines and pulls out off flavors, burnt flavors, inclusion flavors that you don't want to be transferred to your chocolate, and it gets tossed. And we have, I think, 6 mechanics on staff, and all but one of them has an automotive background. The one comes from, I think he was a jet engine mechanic, but we're inclined to think automotively, and we said, what if we made fuel out of the waste? My husband put forth this idea, who owns the company, and I thought that was brilliant. I just loved it. I was like, yeah, let's make biofuel. Heck yes, this sounds fabulous. And oh, by the way, I'm going to sign up for that all women's rally that we partner with. And oh, by the way, I just bought this truck that we're going to outfit to run on this biofuel. And so, a couple of kitchen dates later, we made biofuel in mason jars and decided to scale it. And so last year I did run 8 days, 1,600 miles, running not on a B100. I was in a Volkswagen Touareg, and I ran B20 to B40 depending on the weather. And it was awesome. It was incredible. The mileage and the performance was breathtaking.
So what kind of, I guess I'm not familiar with biofuels, especially. You're running the entire Rebelle Rally on biofuel, correct? The vehicle is tuned to run specifically on this biofuel?
Yep.
What is the refilling kind of situation? Do you bring your own fuel along with you?
I do. So, I mean, in most race circuits, you hire a fuel company. They truck in tankers, and most of the time you're running a normal gasoline. If you're running, most of the support vehicles are diesel, so they always have diesel on hand, and I just brought my own fuel with me. I met up with the tanker team beforehand and gave them my barrels. They put it in the back of their pickup, and it just traveled with the tanker. And then I'd fill up each night from my own barrels.
Okay, so you're supplying the supplier to supply you.
Yep.
All right,
Yep.
I like it.
God, this is so DIY. Yeah, I love it. So
yeah, and everything's made in-house at your chocolate factory?
It is.
Wow. That's pretty
so
amazing.
That sounds creepy. We have a separate building we call the boneyard. It's where we keep like the spare equipment, machines that aren't active, spare parts, and there happens to be a fuel making pad in there. It's not actually in the factory.
Yeah, I wouldn't assume that your local health code would.
Oh lordy. Yeah, we partitioned it off with a shower curtain. No, we don't do that.
Yeah.
Well, hey, now don't talk about my operation.
You haven't said the name of the chocolate company yet, so there's no issues right here. So all out of the way first, and then you can plug your chocolate company. So no problem.
Oh God.
That's really cool. Like Andrew said, the DIY aspect of that is really neat, and the supplying your supplier to supply you the whole time is kind of an interesting factor nobody else has to think about. Most people just go and say, "Hey, this is what I need. Bring it to me." It's just a whole another level of having to prep this, and it's one more thing that you have to have your own. It's your responsibility to make sure it's right, and that's impressive to say the least.
Thank you.
I only know like cursory information about biofuel. I know a lot of people make it out of like they'll go to their local fast food joints and grab the oil that's left over. Yep. So from watching Food Network, cocoa butter is pretty oily. Is that where you're getting?
It's no. That's cool. So no, biofuel is pretty old school.
Yeah.
Like literally, the diesel engine was designed to run on a plant-based fuel. Because the French wanted something they could send to the colonies in Africa that they didn't have to supply refined oil for. That essentially could be self-sufficient and could run on vegetable-based products. So the most common biofuel is soybean.
Okay.
So you have two qualms about why biofuel isn't really a viable option for fuel needs. One is that, it's primarily soybean is the primary source. And if you're going to take food crop and turn it into fuel, there's real complaint about why are there starving people, but you're going to make fuel. I don't know if that was phrased coherently, but why would you take a potential food product when people are starving and turn it into fuel when you have gasoline, when you have petrol diesel. People are up in arms about it. The other thing is that soybean compared to petrol diesel is calorically inferior, which means you're losing power. So you could be running a quote unquote green fuel, but the power output is it's less than if you're running what you get out of the green handle at the pump.
Yeah, it's like when people run ethanol or full ethanol in their vehicle. Yeah, you have to run more of it. You can make more power because it burns cooler, but you need to use like 3 times
a lot
as
more.
much.
Yeah. And so there's always been trade-offs in this sort of green movement towards biofuel as a mainstream product. But it turns out that cocoa butter is incredibly calorically dense, far more so than, and I haven't actually done the math. I wish that I could give you the exact number than petrol diesel. And we're talking about diverting waste from a landfill. We're not talking about a food product that, choosing fuel over feeding a population. We're literally diverting just from this one factory. Potentially, we could divert 40,000 kilos annually. In the United States, my rough math estimates that we could divert, if we were actually taking all the cocoa butter that goes to landfill, 4 million kilos annually, which is a heck of a lot of fuel. And just initial tests we ran, again, I ran last year on a B20 to a B40, so 20 to 40% biofuel to petrol diesel. And my power, my efficiency increased exponentially. You think about I wish I knew my numbers, and I'm sorry I didn't look them up beforehand. But you estimate that the V10 Touareg diesel runs like 25 to 28 miles per gallon, and then you take it off road, and your average speed is 25 miles an hour, and maybe you're trending 20 miles per gallon. I was averaging for the entire rally 45 to 60 miles per gallon.
Wow.
That's impressive. Yeah.
That is very impressive being off-road.
It is. Thank you. And that's the same output as a Porsche Cayenne hybrid. And no lithium and no children were harmed in the mining of the lithium for this vehicle or its fuel. Sorry, that's a little political. The last week running a B100 of our newly engineered fuel, I think we easily saw a 20% increase in power, and it was a small batch, like 30 miles in an unclean system that hadn't been prepped for bio, and the emissions was greatly reduced. The average, statistically, soybean reduces your emissions by 75%. It's really quite impressive. But because of the caloric value of cocoa and its ability to burn so cleanly, I actually think, and I'll say it out loud, I think we could muster a 90% increase or improvement in emissions.
Which is something that's incredible for modern standards, to improve something that's already pretty clean nowadays compared to what it used to be. To make it that much cleaner is very impressive. And you touched on real quickly right there the fact that you're going to take food away from starving children, or not sending children to work in the mines to farm lithium. That's always been the problem with any kind of alternative fuel right now, is no matter what alternative we have, there's always a negative to it somewhere else. It seems like the batteries, you have the lithium, and you have the mining of it and the disposal of it, and diesel is obviously diesel. We don't need to discuss the problems with diesel. and any of these things. Even they talk about wind power and harnessing wind power and harnessing the sun, the solar power, and everything needs batteries. And there's always a negative to the positive, and there's not really an answer yet. So it's neat to have.
Everything's a very complex system, right?
Yeah, there's no one way to fix everything.
Mm-hmm.
It just creates something new and say we're all better. Everything is good. Everything is just a constant evolution. And I think that this biodiesel is something that I've always kind of had on the purview of my brain, but I haven't actually, dived quite into. I've never owned a diesel that was old enough that I was willing to do this kind of conversion or the work for it. I ideally drive a diesel Volkswagen, which is, either good or bad, depending on how you look at it. But I've never really gone beyond, hey, this is different than the gas cars I'm used to. Maybe we could try doing something else with it. And it's neat that this is something that a DIY person could essentially take on themselves and create their own clean energy. They can do their own, making their carbon footprint smaller, which is something that's such a huge thing in the world right now, is trying to be as responsible as we can without making it too inconvenient on ourselves. So it's really neat to hear about this stuff. And, I always have this thought in my brain that maybe there's a way that someday we'll make synthetic fuel that will burn cleaner and we won't have to rely on crude oil anymore. And, these kinds of things are just different directions of that. And it's neat to hear that it works this efficiently and this well.
Thank you. And I think it's very, very valid what you say when can you shift your perspective to find new solutions instead of imagining that, I don't know if electric is the future. I think it's part of the future, but I think there are a lot of options out there, and all it takes is that shift in perception to identify them.
And my personal view on that same question is electric is certainly part of the future, and the electric gas hybrid, I think, is probably what's going to be most popular for this foreseeable future. But I wish that people would start, and maybe they are. I'm not, again, educated enough on this to know that maybe it's time to start, instead of thinking of ways to eliminate the internal combustion engine, maybe try to find ways to make something that burns cleaner and is synthetic and replaceable. And who knows? That's always been my thought on the process. But I'm just one guy who works in car insurance and doesn't.
Well, there are already so many vehicles on the road, so many engines already made. What can you do with what already exists? And the United States has made pretty good strides, but up until 3 years ago, the average age for a car to be junked was 9 years. And how, honest to goodness, what are you really doing with a junked car? How much of it, we say it gets recycled, but give me a break. Most of it ends up in a pit.
Small percentage, yeah.
Mm-hmm. And so, to breathe new life into machines that were really built to endure, if you cared for them correctly and you modernize them a little, it's a really cool possibility.
Unfortunately, a lot of that 9-year lifespan is going to have to be retaught, because that's part of the whole consumerist, I need the newest and greatest all the time thing is part of that as well. It's not necessarily the vehicle's fault. That's more so.
No, it's part of our culture.
A mindset of our culture, exactly. But
must have new, which I get.
Yeah. But as car enthusiasts, as motorsports enthusiasts, and as people who do care about the environment, you always kind of struggle with this internal strife of, this thing that I love doing is not exactly great for the longevity of the planet. So what can we do to make it better? And
you make it cool,
right?
You make it as cool as the new release of the iPhone. So
right. Which
working
is what
on
you're
that.
trying to do here. I like that, and that's what in a lesser scale. Andrew and I are vintage car enthusiasts. We own vintage cars and we keep them running and we keep them on the road and we try to make them interesting and get more people involved with it. And I think that the vintage car is a way to save the environment in its own little way, because we're not buying new cars all the time. But that's a whole nother discussion for a whole nother day. It all kind of ties back to this. You're making your own fuel, and that's at the crux of the conversation. That's the coolest part. You're making your own fuel, and you can make it for as long as you guys are making chocolate. The world could run out of crude oil tomorrow, and you can drive this Mercedes anywhere you want, and that's wild to me. That's cool.
Thanks.
Okay, so right here we lost Kristian's audio. She lives in a rural area, and the internet cut out. Unfortunately, we couldn't reconnect to finish out the episode, but I think we got a good chunk of an interview with her. So from here on out, we'll let Joe finish it out. And thank you, Kristian, for being on, and thanks for listening.
So I think I have a question for Joe. Being the mechanic / evil genius, what's the basic of the conversion required to run a vehicle on biodiesel?
It's kind of interesting. The biggest thing is the fuel pump and all the lines that transfer the physical fuel from the tank to the actual engine. I mean, once it gets inside the injection pump and to the injectors, I mean, that's all brass crush washers. There's no real rubber there to worry about. So, the number one thing we did is gutted all of the original Mercedes stuff. So we don't have the old mechanical lift pump anymore. We don't have, any of the old hardened plastic, fuel lines that are designed to operate at like 3 PSI, on a good day. And we just threw it all in the garbage because it was garbage to begin with. We basically upgraded to almost a Class 8 truck style fuel system that is able to take the fuel from the tank and clean it, filter it, and separate the water, everything. I mean, kind of with the dual filter setup, it's not only a particular but a water separation system. And then it pumps it to the injection pump at a preset pressure that we set and go to town. So that's been the number one thing we've had to work for. Aside from that, we're also conscious of the temperature variations that this truck's going to endure and the temperature limitations of the biofuel. And I don't know if Kristian touched on it. No, she didn't touch on it yet, but the fuel that she has is cold stable down to an extremely low temperature. So in essence, she just made my job that much easier. But really, it's just getting a heat system to the fuel pumps, the fuel line, and the tank for those nights, when it gets down to 20 degrees, 15 degrees. Just want to make sure we don't have a big waxy clump of mold in the bottom of the tank. We want to get that stuff out of there. So that's been one of the big things. The other aspect is, we say reliability and serviceability. So, if she's out in the desert or wherever and she gets in a bind where, sand gets in there, she gets a funky batch of fuel and it starts crystallizing or doing something goofy, she has the ability just to spin the filters off and spin on a new set and get back on the road. Fortunately, the system doesn't burn a whole lot of it. It's super efficient. So, in theory, she'll be able to go thousands and thousands of miles before she depletes the capacity of the filter. So that's just the fuel system.
Yeah, that's what we start with the fuel system is what we're most curious about initially, because I wanted to know what the difference was between, a standard diesel system and a biofuel diesel system, because, I mean, I guess you can't really call it diesel because it's not diesel anymore. It's a totally separate system. It's a diesel engine name only. There's nothing diesel about biofuel. It's totally different. I've spent the past, better part of half a decade daily driving a diesel vehicle, whether it be my Volkswagen or a pickup truck. And one of the biggest issues I always had formerly living in New England, of course, was temperature. And you had to make sure that was nice and warm, or you had to run additives in your fuel to keep it from freezing. That's something that you have to do with the bio as well. You need to, you said pretty cold, but what's pretty cold? What's the limit of?
So I think she's down to about 20 degrees, which is phenomenal. I mean, that's groundbreaking for this type of product. And,
it's honestly not much different than a regular standard diesel.
Exactly. And something like that, we can get away with a really light duty style heater system to keep this thing up and running. Really, we want to stay away from those additives for a couple of reasons. Mainly, it's not diesel. It's not fuel that you're putting in there. It's basically something to, break up all the substructure of the biofuel. And that stuff doesn't burn. It just comes out as particulate through the exhaust. So we want to keep that out of the equation. And it robs power and all that other fun stuff. So, in an imperfect world, you're going to need it. in our hypothetical perfect scenario, we're going to try to go without that and just use more of an organic substance, which is heat and a fuel thermostat and so forth. So that's really where we're going with it. And, starting with this type of truck, we have the benefit where, like I said, we just have some nasty fuel lines we got rid of, and everything else is steel. So we can just roll from there.
Awesome. I look forward to seeing the results in this thing running for sure.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, the other week, our test, we actually ran it in one of our shop trucks just because her truck was in the middle of surgery. And, we pumped the tank dry and just ran B100 straight through it. And I got to say, it was amazing, the results. Typically, the truck runs a little dirty. It's a third-gen Dodge Cummins common rail. And, it runs a little dirty. It's a big, heavy truck. And we pumped the tank dry and just ran this stuff to about 2.5 gallons through it just straight. And it was amazing to see 100% clear emissions through the tailpipe, with your foot to the floor. It's like, oh my gosh, we never get this. So it was pretty cool. I was stoked.
That's really neat. Have you guys ever experienced any other kind of biofuel or just this chocolate?
Well, back in my day, I've played around with a couple different options of stuff. Like I said, I'm friends with a bunch of other dumb rednecks, and old hot water heaters, you get a bunch of fryer grease and try to make stuff up until a French fry clogs up your injector, and that's no fun. So give you your answer, yes, I've played around with it in the past. However, it's been dismal results. And I think a lot part of it's just been the lack of engineering and lack of kind of seeing it through to the end. This is the first time I've actually firsthand experienced driven a vehicle which has fuel that's been clean, it's been engineered, and it works. So that's been the big game changer.
Awesome. Andrew, you have a question? Oh no. All right. Well, you work on that. I'll quiz Joe some more on the truck. What other modifications are you making to this truck, Joe, to make the 30-year-old G wagon viable for this event? Because I know the last time we spoke to people who ran the event, they ran in a brand new Toyota. So. Yep.
Yeah. Golly, where do we start? I guess we'll stick with the drivetrain for now. So, like she said, it had that had a little 603 motor in there with like 134 horsepower. I mean, you could pull a noodle out of a cat's ass with that thing.
The truck itself, is the same that came on the U.S. model sedans, correct?
Yeah. They refer to them as the old rod benders. They're the motors that you hear in like the old Mercedes, and you wonder, is there any oil in that damn thing?
I mean, my father used to have an SD 300 SD. So it's probably that same basic engine in there.
Exactly. Yeah. They were total turds from the get go. Anyway, that came out. The 606 is what we put in there, and it's kind of a cool motor. It's known as the Diesel JZ. It uses the same basic block architecture and crank as like the M104, which came out right before the 2JZ that Toyota made. So it's an incredibly well-built motor that's designed to rev and spin. It's a 24-valve head, flows great, but it's still running a mechanical pump, which gives you that flexibility with tunability. So that went into the truck. And like she said, the first iteration was 400 horse. When I came on board, the motor was in it, but it was a manual transmission. And so we kind of played around with that a little bit. And I saw her right after the last Rebelle, and it didn't go so hot. And, that's where we had our first discussion of, let's get rid of this manual that's not working and go with an automatic. A couple of reasons for that were, it's so much easier to drive. When you've got that much power and you're focusing off-road, you don't want to be modulating the clutch, or you don't want to be worrying about what gear you're in or any of that kind of garbage. You just want to be able to step on the accelerator and go. The other reason it was having such a hard issue is the only transmission that would physically bolt up to that motor came out of a C-Class. And it was only designed to take, give or take, 200 and some odd horse. And it just wasn't up to the task. And the other part of that equation is it had a super small clutch. So she said, she had to have one custom made. It was a dual disc that was made to handle the power, but at the expense of drivability. So it just had to go.
The other issue is torque too through a smaller transmission probably isn't good.
Yeah, totally.
Transmission, torque more than horsepower for sure.
Yeah, we actually, when we got the truck, we took it out on test drive, and on our test drive, it completely grenaded the transmission. So that's how close it was to the breaking point.
So
we actually, We went with a 722.6. So it's kind of a widely known. It's a 5-speed automatic, fully electronically controlled with the lockup torque converter, and it came in the E-Class from the late '90s on, and Chrysler kind of bought the rights to it, and they used it in everything all the way to like the Jeep Grand Cherokees, Chrysler 300s. I think they kept it in line all the way to like 2012, somewhere in that ballpark. So it's a very widely adaptable unit. And, we basically just bought a core and we went through it, had it built with all the Kevlar clutches and all the Gucci stuff, put it in, and we're running it via a standalone controller that we sourced out of Denmark. And it works pretty darn good. So no real complaints or issues with it yet. So that's what we did with the drivetrain. And aside from that, like she mentioned, we're kind of on our third iteration of the turbocharger. Because what we realized initially when the motor was stuck in there, you think in rally, off-road, you want tons of power and torque. So they built it right around 450 horse. And so we ran a big turbo, big fuel pump, and, it made the power, but golly, it took forever to get there. It just you'd sit there and it'd be like dial up waiting for it to spool and come on the pipe. So I started downsizing the turbo to the point now we're running a smaller Borg Warner EFR turbo. It's a full ceramic ball bearing unit. And hopefully that'll kind of get us where we need to be with drivability and power and all that kind of good stuff.
Yeah, you would think you'd want something that spins a little faster being off-road too, because you're not going to be running high revs.
Yeah.
You just want it to make torque down low.
Yeah, exactly. It's really interesting. This also ties in with how clean the motor is and emissions too, because there's two schools of thought. One is, you can always put a big turbo, big fuel, and get tons of power at the expense of emissions. You get a ton of particulate out the exhaust. It rolls coal. It's not really fun to drive on the road. And the other thing that you got to keep in mind is this is a heavy truck. I don't know if she mentioned it's a 6,000-pound rig going down the road. It's not just a G-Wagon, but it's full off-road tires. It's running BFG KM3s, full Hutchison beadlocks, plus 2 spares, roof rack, full kit. It's loaded. It squats. So, it doesn't need the big turbo. It needs a small turbo to light quickly and get up to 200 to 300 horsepower immediately. And it can maintain that so much easier than it can trying to wrap to 4,000 RPM just to squeak that extra power. So that's been the big hurdle for us to overcome. And the other thing we're fighting is, like she said, we're a mile above sea level, so there's just not a whole lot of oxygen up here. So you have to work it pretty hard to get there.
Yeah, I've driven over the pass in Colorado before. It's definitely an interesting experience. Once you press the top there, it's, I don't know, what is it, 12,000 feet or something like that? And it's
once you crest the top and you go down, it's like, whew, thank God, we can relax. So the brakes are up.
Big truck brakes the whole way down, unfortunately, but
totally.
It's definitely a whole different experience. You're up that high in a vehicle, and it was my daily driven car, and I put 30,000 miles on it, and very experienced how it feels, and it was a very different thing climbing that hill. That's for sure. Not something I want to do every day. So
and that's the other.
Driven some vehicles at elevation before, but that was a different experience altogether, and that was with a turbo diesel. So,
oh man, yeah, it's interesting. So this is kind of our proving ground, and we figure if we can make it work here, we can make it work anywhere. Because the other thing you got to contend with is heat. No one ever talks about that. Is you can make all the power in the world, but if you can't keep it cool, you're hosed. So, first things first, out came the mechanical fan, and then went a full electric unit. And that thing kind of runs all the time. We have a giant intercooler that runs across the bottom right behind a giant skid plate. So it's got airflow there, separate tranny coolers, oil coolers. I mean, everything's running its own braided lines. I mean, it's kind of complex. And that's been a morphing process also. It was, like I said, when we got the truck, it just had the old fan clutch with just a spinning fan and no shroud. And it was like, man, this thing, it would overheat 2 times around the block and be back at square one. So now we've got it to the point, though, where about a month ago, we took it out on a full day of trail bashing. And it was, when I say trail bashing, it was definitely A-level trails. And, it's kind of nice riding passenger with Kristian, and she just kind of walks around all the Jeep guys, and they just look and their jaws drop like, what the hell is that? But the truck didn't get hot. It rock crawled over all the boulders, didn't do anything weird. The other part is we had air conditioning the whole time. First time that's actually come online. It was about 98 degrees outside. So I think we're almost there with that. We're pretty happy with how that's coming along.
That's neat. What's cool about the G-Wagon is, even though the truck is 30 years old, I mean, they still made them until last year, and they started in
Yeah,
the early 70s. So you have
yeah.
a lot of
2018.
development for that vehicle. Like there's been a lot of
Totally, man.
development over the years. It was developed as a military vehicle, so it's not it's not it's not commercial grade. It's a heavier duty vehicle, so it's definitely something people don't realize when they see them in rap videos, that they're actually super capable off-road machines, and that's
Oh,
what they were designed
exactly.
for. So
Yeah,
it's
it's
funny.
they came out in 1979, and they use the exact same frame, body architecture, everything. You can actually bolt the fenders from a 79 onto a 2018. They share all the same mounting points and locations. So the
There's just
interesting thing is they stuck everything from 6 cylinders, V8s, V12s in these damn things, and hell, if Mercedes can make them fit, so can we. So it's all about just putting the
there's
right
a few of
combination of
them.
parts together.
There's a few of them running around the Phoenix area that are earlier, late 70s two-door convertibles that have bolted on, the 2018 bodywork to make them look like something that they're not. So it's definitely something I'm used to seeing. It's definitely very common. Not really common, but there's a few of them around here, more than there should be. So people
Yeah.
trying to pretend they're something they're not, basically, but nobody off-roads them. Don't usually see that. It's funny. Andrew and I
Yeah.
were talking about our experience in off-roading not being, long term. It's a fairly new thing to us in the past, I don't know, 5 or 6 years. And we're Mitsubishi people at heart. We were into Eclipses and Starions and that stuff as kids. And we've kind of really developed that as our own little niche. And the Montero is the vehicle that we're most familiar with as far as off-roading. So when you talk about Jeep guys looking at you like, what are you doing in that thing? Like, we have the same kind of thing with a Jeep with Montero, because Monteros are also they're developed the same time as the G-Wagon. They all competed
totally.
in the Paris to Dakar. The Monteros and the G-Wagons were actually competitors, and they were developed for third world countries and sold to Americans to just drive to the mall with. So they're certainly much more capable than they're given credit for. So there's some similarities there that will tie this into some of our listeners who are from our Montero friends.
Oh yeah. Oh, it's kind of cool. Like all the Jeep guys, like, man, what's in that? Like, factory locking differentials from day one, and they're like, what? It's like, hell yeah, man, these things were stacked, they're ready to go.
Yep.
So
yeah.
it's kind of wild.
A 99 Montero that's got a factory air locker in it, which Jeep guys are like, it does what now?
Yeah.
Oh, even Toyota guys.
Yeah, even Toyota guys say the same thing. So suspension wise, anything done at the truck, or is it mostly factory?
And, well, it's interesting. Most of it is factory. However, we're running different springs and shocks. So we're running a progressive rate spring that lifts the truck up about 2.5, 3 inches in an ideal world. But like I said, this thing is a porker. It's fat. So realistically, it rides about 1.5 inches higher than what it should. So it's got more suspension droop than anything. Shocks, though, we're running a set of King remote reservoir adjustable shocks. So the big 2.5-inch guys. And they're pretty stout. We've run them on a couple other trucks, and we've been pretty happy with them. So we're sticking with what we know works. And they're just tough to beat. The other thing is we can always rebuild them. So we're going King all the way around with the hydraulics. Obviously we've got braided lines everywhere. The back axle is one though that we had to switch. What's interesting about the G is these things came with disc front, the drum brakes rear, all the way through 1997. After that, they switched to disc brakes. Naturally, this truck's in 92, so the rear end got swapped over for a newer one. Had to match ring and pinion, but now we have 4-wheel disc, and it works pretty good. So leave it alone. If it's not broke, just keep rocking it.
Yeah, again, they were built to run in some pretty gnarly conditions, so I think the stock stuff is pretty well suited. Just get some good tires and some good armor, and
totally. It's interesting. The axles are pretty well set up. It's a lot like the Toyota Burfield style axle. The same thing as in the Land Rovers too. With the closed knuckle design, it's got that funky scupper ring, and it's got the CB shaft on the inside. They work pretty darn good, and that's why you can run these things through the desert and the water all in the same day, and not have to worry about a whole bunch of crap getting in there. So pretty happy with the reliability on that one, because that's the last thing we want to have to mess with out in the field. So we're doing that, and then for wheels and tires, we're running a full set of Hutchison bead locks. I don't know if you've ever dealt with those, but they only weigh between like 800 and 8,000 pounds each, if you've ever had to deal with one. They're definitely hernia inducing, but we paired those with the BFG KM3. It's running on a set of, it's about 34-inch tall tires right now. They're metric, whatever it translates to, 305, 75, 16s. But they're heavy, but we can run them down to about 5 psi, and they just kind of crawl over stuff and get us where we need to go. So she's insistent on carrying 6 tires, so 4 on the truck and 2 spares. I'm thinking, good God, if you pop one of these, you got bigger issues to worry about.
Yeah, just trying to change it too is probably not going to be fun on the field.
Oh my God, you have to switch out the wheel bolts to race car studs and just to get the thing to bolt up right. But it's a riot, man. We've had I think I personally, my best time is about 2 hours to mount 6 of them in the shop.
That does not sound fun.
It's a workout, man.
I've always joked that the reason we never got into trucks, other than not being around a place where they made sense, was because I don't like working on things that have 8 lug wheels. I just want to put 4 lugs on and call it a day.
Yeah, well, it's still a 5 lug wheel, but the thing you got to account for is when you put the wheels together, you've got like 30 bolts around the outside, putting the outer ring on. You have to do all by hand.
Specific pattern for that too, I'm sure.
Yep. And you got to torque them all down and yada yada. So eat your Wheaties.
Yeah. So what's going to be your role on the days of the rally? Are you going to be there as support, or are you sending them off in the truck on their own, or what's the plan?
So that's kind of interesting. It's a closed rally, so there's no spectators. There is mechanic support, but not for specific teams. So what that means is, Kristian or co-driver, they show up, they get to the starting line, and they set off. There are mechanics on staff, if you're to throw a belt or, throw a brake pad or something goofy like that. There's people that'll help out and get you squared away from that perspective. And but there's no set, like there's not going to be a Kristian mechanic, and there's not going to be a Toyota mechanic over here. So I've committed I will get the truck to the rally, and I will be there just in case. And I've also coordinated with the rally, the lady that's putting the rally on said, I'd love to volunteer to be a mechanic on staff. I understand the potential ramifications of conflict of interest, but I'm here if you'd like it. So I may come on as just a generic mechanic, just to be part of the team, so to speak, and we'll just have to wait and see. So,
well, maybe they let you work on other people's trucks, but not hers.
Right. That's probably how it'll come down. No, my luck, I'll get stuck working on a Mitsubishi Pajero or something, right?
Hey, just give us a call. We'll give you all the advice you need. No.
Pretty good on duct tape and zip ties.
Yeah, that's about what we need. Yeah, we'll keep them running.
Right. Sounds like Kristen did email me back. Sounds like she lost internet for some reason. So,
well, that's not
trying
good.
to get back in. Yeah.
Well, that stinks. But
it happens.
So, Joe, a couple things we can close out with probably.
Okay.
Where can we follow along with this build? What's Kristian's Instagram or Facebook group, or is it something where we can follow this build, or is it kind of private?
Yes. Yeah, so I have it. I have little bits and pieces of it on my Facebook and Instagram. It's allianceautocare.com is my website. Alliance Auto Care on Facebook, and then Instagram I think is at Alliance Auto Loveland. So, and then Kristian has it on hers.
Okay.
I think it's
Wunder. Yeah, Wunder Collective, I believe, on Instagram. But
if you go to WUNDER.film, that's where she has the video, the truck, the latest videos on there. You see a little bit about me because I'm yakking on that thing too. You can see the inside of my shop a little bit, but that gets changed up kind of daily. In fact, the first shot of it is on our last 4-wheeling trip, so it's kind of cool. So she keeps up with there. I think
since Kristian's not here, we'll promote that on our site, I guess, if we can get back a hold of her later on. You do run Alliance Auto Care in Loveland, Colorado.
Yep.
Is that your general service shop, or?
It's more of a specialty shop. We primarily specialize in European. We do a lot of Mercedes, Porsche, Land Rover, all that kind of fun stuff. A little bit of fab work, a little bit of custom stuff. But golly, we do a crap load of G-Wagon stuff. I guess I'll leave it at that. We usually have anywhere from 10 to 12 of these things in our shop at any given time.
So if someone was looking for foreign car service in Loveland, Colorado, you really got to call.
We are the ones that get called. In fact, we get all of these G-Wagons. that we have here, Kristian's is the only one that's local. Every single one gets shipped in from all over the United States.
Wow.
That's awesome. It's good. It's good to be
Yeah.
known as the G-Wagon guy. That's neat.
Yeah, it is. And, it's interesting. She mentioned that, you can't get the diesel ones in the United States. Last year, actually, we successfully imported 2 2018 diesel Gs into the U.S.
And got them registered and plated?
Registered and completed. They're kind of spendy, though. They're not your everyday. Anyway.
Well, describing a G-Wagon as spendy means it's probably really spendy, because in general, they're pretty spendy.
Yeah, they're kind of cool. They're kind of wild. So it's quite the stepping stone from a poor Kentucky boy to work on cool stuff like this.
Yeah, it's funny because you keep bringing up that that redneck background, but yet you're a Mercedes and Porsche mechanic. So,
oh, dude, I love it. I mean, my personal ride, I drive a 1980 911. It's an ex-race car that I converted back to street use. I still keep the cage in. It's still got the seats, and it's loud. It's unreal.
So at 80, would that be an SC yet?
Yep, it's an SC.
That's cool.
SC, it's brown. It's uglier than shit, but it is cool.
That's what makes the era. The brown cars make the late 70s, early 80s cars. That's pretty cool.
Yeah, I just want to know, who the hell went to the dealership and said, you know what, out of all the colors here, give me the brown one.
Well, it was the 1970s. It was very trendy. The same guy who probably bought an avocado fridge 10 years earlier,
Yeah.
So, you can't look at it through the eyes of 2020. You got to look at it through the eyes of 1980.
They're just dead on the inside.
I happen to like brown cars. I've had a brown car myself, which is even a worse brown car because it was a Dodge Colt, but it was not a Porsche in any means.
Yeah, I just can't get away from them. I found it on Bring a Trailer, and my wife was like, "Oh man, that's what you've been looking for." I'm like, "Really, a brown car?" She's like, "I already bought it."
Oh, that's pretty good. That's pretty good. Listen,
Yeah.
I like brown cars, specifically brown metallic cars. I think the Porsche is probably a solid brown, no metallic, right?
No, this is the they call it bronze metallic. It was 1980. If you look up the 1980 White Sox edition,
okay,
one of those.
That's awesome.
Yeah, if you hop on Bring a Trailer, you'll see it. I think I bought it February year before last. Just go through the history. So it's one of the race cars. It's got 311 on the side. It kept delivery and everything. It's kind of a cool car.
That's very cool. Very, very neat daily driver. It's very Colorado. I like that.
Yeah, totally. So yeah, we do that. Other than that, obviously we all have G-Wagons. We all drive them, and it just comes to how can we cut them up and make them cool. So it kind of goes against the cultural norm, so to speak.
Well, so your Porsche does too. It's the outlaw kind of thing there. You have a race car you're driving on the street, and you have G-Wagons that you cut up and go off road with. That's kind of fits together there, I think.
Yeah, it's cool. One of my other clients, he shipped his truck out here in his old 320G. He saw Kristian's in the back of the shop, and he saw that. It's like, man, I want that same motor, same tranny in mine with the lift. So we just got the truck back from paint, and it's getting ready to go under surgery.
That's cool. These kinds of race car builds certainly are good advertising, that's for sure. So that's
it works out pretty nicely. We tend to stay pretty quiet about it, though, in all honesty. I mean, word of mouth has really been our king. And I mean, for instance, right now we're scheduling for January for this kind of stuff. We're pretty far out. So
awesome.
Coming along. In fact, January, we're looking to do our first pickup truck conversion on one of these.
I actually saw my first 6x6 just yesterday in traffic.
Oh, really?
Yeah, it was right outside of Scottsdale, which is obviously
that makes sense.
A highfalutin zip code out here. So I know those are quite spendy vehicles. I had never seen one in person before. I'd only heard the lore on the internet. Yeah, it's a large vehicle. It was very, very tall, had portal axles, 6 of them, and was pretty ridiculous.
Yeah, that's cubic dollar territory right there.
Yeah, I just bought a house, and I think I probably paid a fourth of what he's into that truck for. So it's definitely not my territory.
If you've got a cool $1 million to spend, that's one way to do it.
Yeah, that's so exactly a fourth. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, the pickup truck ones are going to be interesting. There's currently one in the U.S. that sits in California, and the guy brought it in from the Netherlands. And they're so rare. No one in the U.S. has done it yet. So I have another guy in California who's got a California legal truck. It's an early 2000 model, and he's dying for it. So I've been pushing him off for the last year, and finally we set a date of January. He's going to ship it in, and we're going to go to town. So we're setting up our frame jigs and getting ready to do a frame stretch, back half cut, and we're going to use the bed from an early 460 Wolf chassis to make it all come together.
I don't know what that is, but I'll be Googling that and figuring it out because that sounds cool.
Figure like the most girly little 2-door pickup truck G-Wagon you can think of, and using one of those little pickup beds. They're kind of pitiful.
That sounds like what I would want to actually own.
Yeah, but when you put them together, they look kind of cool.
Huh. I dig it. That's really cool. Well, Joe, it was awesome to have you on.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, we lost Kristian, but that's okay. We'll see if we can catch back up with her and maybe get a few more statements from her and just tack them on at the end here. But
cool.
Thanks for saving us from her internet and keeping the interview going.
No worries.
Awesome knowledge. Super encouraged about this biodiesel stuff. And
yeah.
Dude, that stuff is incredible.
Yeah. I'd like to learn more and experience myself someday that has something with that. And I don't know. It's interesting. It's neat to think about being totally self-sufficient and not having to rely on Sunoco. So
yep.
Yeah, totally. It's good stuff. I like it. I was happy. We ran it through our shop truck and it was just like, dude, this is good stuff. Keep making it.
Excellent. All right. Well, again, people can find you at Alliance Auto Care, which is allianceautocare.com.
Correct.
And they can search that out on the Instagram and on Facebook.
Yes.
Excellent. Any parting thoughts?
It's been great. Stay tuned. Good things are going to come.
Excellent.
Cool.
Well, thank you very much.
Thanks
You're
a
welcome.
lot.
Thanks, guys.
You can follow us on Facebook, Auto Off Topic Podcast. Follow us on Twitter, Auto Off Topic. Follow us on Instagram, Auto Off Topic. Follow me, Race and Anger, on Instagram, and Brad, TSISS350. Keep cars analog and aim for the roses.